reason that he's still alive with us today. The same, of course, can't be said for King Von, a Parkway Gardens veteran who supposedly caught numerous bodies and didn't care who knew it. Of course, only recently half taken over the rap game, releasing what often felt more like confessions than actual songs. But all the way back in the early 2010s, King Von had been repping his BD affiliation on social media to the fullest, holding down the blocks of Parkway and showing love to his gang for the entire world to see.
Yeah, bitch. What do you see? Yeah.
Other big names in the Wick City BD set include feared supposed shooters like HK and J Money or J Munna. Then of course there's King Von's beloved BD bro T Roy, who is apparently a bit of a dynamic duo along with Von, with the close bond between these two becoming very relevant later in the story. And in fact, this is the exact reason why even right up until his death in 2020, King Von used to go by the name V-Roy on Twitter. And the fact that he comes from Wick City is why his Twitter handle still is @KingVon from the Wick. Basically, King Von and T-Roy loved their gang and they loved their block, holding it down with other Wick City members like Big A, OD, Trey 5, Platoon, Boss Money, Sharoid, Duke, who's actually been mentioned in numerous King Von lyrics, Rah Rah aka Breezy, and Boss Top, who also became a rapper like Keef, even actually going on to drop a song called Wick City, and even later falling out with Chief Keef after apparently stealing clothes from him, leading DJ Academics in the War of Chiraq era to affectionately dub him the Diaper Bandit. And look, I know by no means is this a completely extensive list of every member who has ever been affiliated with Wick City or O Block, and especially as of recently, names like Muwop and Gleesh have become more relevant. For the purpose of today's story, this isn't an O Block member lineup. It's just an initial introduction to the main events of the beef up until around 2014. But don't get it twisted, if we go into a future video covering further into this beef, I will of course introduce new names. But the names aren't really what's important, it's the sentiment. These were the Wick City BDs holding down their block and doing the most to fight their ops. The Wick City BDs were very well known for throwing up GDK hand signs repeatedly to show the world that they were GD killers who were very much indeed down to ride and kill.
GDK shit, man.
Everybody got the voice in their hand, man. You feel me? GDK, broke boys.
So, who were the GD boys that these guys wanted to K so badly? Well, over on the STL EBT side, they were up against a few names who you might know if you're well versed in Chicago drill culture. The first to come to mind is Jakira Barnes, also known as Key or KI, a young female hitter who was good friends with fellow member Tuka growing up. Another member was FBG Butter, who along with KI were also known as a bit of a dynamic duo dubbed the Twins. Other members actually went by FBG or Flyboy Gang, an STL EB clique more focused on making music, which included other names like FBG Brick, and of course the legendary FBG Duck. Another musically inclined member who repped FBG was Lil J, who lived in STL and would later become more clicked up with them, but mainly had beef with 600 that kind of ran adjacent to this feud. They had Lil B and Wooski, who had actually been dubbed King of the Ops. There was Boss Trell and Lil Doc. Once again, there might be some names from STL EBT, especially the later years, who haven't been included here, but these are the prominent members of both sides who played a prominent role during this period. So now you know the background and the people involved, let's take a closer look at the actual storyline, so we can get a better understanding of how events unfolded, causing Wick City to become O Block and STL EBT to become.
You might be asking yourself, can you actually create high-quality live stream?
Tookaville. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the true origins of this beef are pretty hard to trace. It would seem pretty unrealistic to try and trace things back to their exact origins in the schoolyard scraps between the BD and GD members from each of these blocks. But we certainly can trace the true bloodshed between these groups back to one pivotal moment, and that's the killing of Edric Tyshawn Walker, also known as Ty, a BD who was gunned down in May 2009 being just 17 years old. Ty was shot multiple times just before 10 PM on the 6500 block of South Evans Avenue, with 3 suspects from EBT being charged with his murder. Now, Ty was actually closer aligned with another BD set called 065 Young Money, but following his death, local friends of his formed the group TYMB, or Ty You're My Brother. This was to both keep his memory alive and also a pledge to avenge him, a move that would become a little bit of a trend as this beef continues. Anywho, the loss of Ty was only the beginning of bloodshed in the area, mainly caused by STL EBT members. And it would actually be the next killing after Ty that would be a direct escalation of war between STL EBT and Wick City. In this case, the person in question was Reezy or Rah Rah, an older OG member of Wick City who was gunned down in August 2010. Reezy, aka Rara, real name Laverick Marshall, was an older OG member of Wick City, and on August the 25th, 2010, Reezy was found shot in the back after the police broke up an enormous fight near 64th Street and South King Drive. Reezy was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Now, there's been a lot of speculation over who committed this crime, but nothing conclusive has ever been proven. But regardless, only a month later, another brutal slaying went down that appeared to be related, this time with an STL EBT member's relative being taken out on their turf. Apparently in this case, a blood relative of STL member FBG Kells, the retaliatory victim was Jeremy Marshall, also known on the street as Lil 4, not to be confused with a different Lil 4 who died in 2013. Jeremy was approached near 63rd and Rhodes Avenue by two people, with one pulling out a gun and beginning to shoot. He was shot in the back and tried to run before collapsing, but unfortunately didn't make it, and the shooters fled the scene in a vehicle. Once again, it was unclear exactly who committed this crime, but intense speculation has suggested that it was somebody from the Wick City BDs, with many going as far to draw a link between the fact that OD Perry from Wick City was gaining a reputation for being a shooter around this time. Now, this can't strictly be proven, but it's likely that there were retaliations between Wick City and STL EBT in the months that followed. And this would lead us to January 2011, where we're introduced to an all too familiar name in Chicago drill, Tooka. On the 12th of January 2011, 15-year-old Shondale Gregory, known on the streets as Tooka, was waiting at a bus stop at the 600 block on East 63rd Street. At a certain point, a dark-coloured vehicle pops up and somebody hops out wearing a half mask. Some have said that this person exchanged a few words with Tooka, but ultimately within seconds, they had shot Tooka multiple times and fled the scene. STL member FBG Duck was actually close friends with Tooka, saying that after hearing about his death, he actually ran to the scene of the crime, where in a tragic moment, he even got to see his slain brother before he was taken away.
Me and him clicked, like that was one of my real close friends. Like every day, like spend the night at his house, he spend the night at mine. And my cousin came in there running to me crying and shit, telling me, your friend just got killed. You feel me? Then I ran all the way from 62nd and Wabash all the way to 63rd to St. Lawrence. Saved them right there on the floor. You know how that shit go, broke right down.
Tooka had unfortunately passed away on the scene before paramedics had arrived, and it's not entirely clear who was responsible for the death of Tooka. As previously discussed, TYMB members were hell-bent on avenging their friend Ty by taking out an STL EBT member. Meanwhile, Wick City members wanted revenge for what had happened to Reezy. But regardless, ultimately Tooka paid his price for his STL EBT affiliation. In response to this tragic loss, STL EBT would rename their hood Tookaville in his honor and as a commitment for revenge. And members like FBG Brick would rep Tooka's memory to the fullest.
Do you represent Tookaville? Oh, to the fullest. That's what I do it for. That's what it's always been about since day one. Just Tooka. Like, my homie was 15 years old when he got killed. Never hurt nobody, never did nothing, you know what I'm saying?
Meanwhile, it's actually been said that it was in response to this that members from TYMB and Wick City clicked up to form an alliance in anticipation of some kind of retaliation. And in the face of an intense desire from Tookaville to avenge their fallen brother, soon emerged an intense desire to disrespect Tooka from the BD side. As you may well know, Tooka's name has been endlessly dragged in hip-hop over the years. Now, I'm not going to get into every instance or drama over this happening, but story goes initially the GDs from Tookaville, people like FBG Duck, were apparently saying that they were smoking Tooka out of respect for him, a nod to the old story that Tupac's crew, the Outlaws, smoked his ashes in a blunt after he died. But the BD ops from Wick City immediately decided to flip this and start making fun of Tookaville. The most immediate and iconic diss, of course, was Chief Keef's song 300, where he says "fuck Tooka gang." And from here, other members continued the disrespect.
Tooka, what I'm smoking on, shut down. Oh, my bitch, do I see your brain? Right up on your block,
But beyond simple shit talking on social media, behind the scenes, a demon was lurking in the shadows. Because as we mentioned briefly earlier, one of Tooka's closest friends growing up was a young girl named K.I. But you might know her better as the young girl who became a teenage assassin, supposedly racking up 17 bodies by 17. Story goes, it was the death of Tooka that actually turned K.I. into a cold-blooded killer. Apparently coached in shooting by her cousin, fellow Tookaville GD boss Trell, and maneuvering in the streets by her older brother Seaball, a bloodthirsty teenage K.I. would soon become a bona fide hitter for the Tookaville GDs. Hellbent on getting revenge for Tooka, K.I. would eventually find it in the form of OD.
Heard about GoDaddy domain names? Go to GoDaddy to buy a dream domain name from 99p with GoDaddy.
At around 11:35 p.m. on August the 10th, 2011, 20-year-old O.D. Perry, respected Wick City member, was shot and killed near Parkway Gardens on 400 block of East 64th Street. O.D. suffered multiple gunshot wounds, including one to the neck, and was pronounced dead at Stroger Hospital within an hour of the shooting. Just like Tooka, in his memory, the Wick City BDs renamed Parkway Gardens O Block in his memory, committing to avenge him. Of course, the likes of Chief Keef and King Von immortalized O Block as it is now known today in their music forever. The killing of O.D. Perry was supposedly revenge for the killing of Tooka, with this apparently being exemplified by the fact that it went down on Tooka's very birthday. O.D.'s killers were never apprehended, but from here, rumors begun to swirl that this was actually the first victim of teenage Tookaville assassin K.I. And one of the people pushing these rumors was of course Lil J, who had apparently shared the following image along with a caption saying shout out to them twins that made O Block, referring to FBG Butter and K.I. However, for the record, no one has been convicted of this crime and there was never any proof tying K.I. or Butter to the killing of O.D. Perry. Well, actually, many years later, a Freedom of Information request did reveal that the cops did officially name K.I. and Bostrel as subjects on the report. This came after an unnamed informant named them as the shooters in 2016, years after they had passed. But let's just assume for 1 second, based on the reputation that K.I. has when she passed, that a 14-year-old girl from Tookaville really did go out on her first trip to the Op Block and claim the life of a respected Wick City older. It kind of makes sense with the narrative. People from Tookaville couldn't believe she'd done this at such a young age. Combine that with the fact that K.I. was supposedly heartbroken over Tooka's death and was desperate to avenge him. The fact that she had done so at such a young age, getting her the respect of the entire gang, leads me to believe that it's absolutely no surprise that from this point she would go on to build a feared reputation as a complete demon of a shooter for Tookaville, quickly becoming a feared figure in the entire Chicago gang scene. And the suspicion that she was indeed involved in the O.D. Perry incident were only fueled further by tweets that she would release dissing O.D., not dissimilar to the way that the guys over on O Block had spoken about Tooka in the past. In fact, there's one detail from this story that is so crazy it's like something straight out of a Hollywood movie. It's actually rumored that there was a huge 357 or 44 Magnum that O.D. Perry was known for flexing. Story goes he had this on him when he was taken out, with K.I. apparently taking the gun away from his body after the hit. A rumor based on the fact that she seemed to flex a near identical gun in the years that followed, seemingly as a trophy on social media. Whether or not this is exactly how this situation went down, we'll probably never know for sure. But at least just for her alleged involvement in the hit that made O Block, K.I. got a big reputation in Tookaville and will begin to make moves in numerous beefs that stretch far beyond just O Block. In some ways, it seemed like she got addicted to shooting and killing, but a lot of her story isn't really relevant to this feud, so some of those details are definitely for another day. But what we do know for sure is that what followed the killing of O.D. Perry was a bloodbath of tit-for-tat violence between O Block and Tookaville that would last nearly 2 years. On the 19th of October 2011, Edward Riley, also known as Platoon, from O Block was walking with his girlfriend on 63rd and King Drive, at which point 2 suspects approached and gunned him down, only 1 block south on 64th, closer to O Block. And from here, the suspects went even further down the block, shooting a 15-year-old in the head who miraculously survived. Platoon unfortunately wasn't so lucky and didn't make it, and in his memory, at least for a brief period, people began to call the area Toontown, though ultimately the name O Block was retained. Once again, there's been intense speculation over exactly what went down or who was responsible for the hit on Platoon, as apparently in addition to Tookaville, a GD set called MOB also had a motive to take out Platoon as part of a different feud that he was involved in via 600, who were also BDs affiliated with O Block. It's actually been suggested that there were 2 assailants there that day, with one being Lil B from Tookaville and the other allegedly being Beans from MOB. It's also been said by many that Wooski from Tookaville was involved in this. And I'll be honest, when I started this video, I said to myself, I don't want to be accusing people of killings that they haven't been convicted for, especially if they're still alive. But hell, I googled who killed Platoon and even Google featured snippets of snitching on Wooski. I couldn't believe that. Many people over on Chiraqology on Reddit have suggested in the past that Wooski had something to do with this, with others writing it off as complete internet cap, mainly due to his young age at the time. All we know is that right now no one has been convicted of the slaying of Platoon, and the really sad thing is that after the loss of such a beloved O Block member, it wouldn't take them long to lose yet another. At 6:47 p.m. on February the 12th, 2012, Sherroyd Liggins of O Block was discovered with a gunshot wound to the head at 6400 block of South King Drive, just outside Parkway Gardens once again. You're starting to see why they call it the most dangerous block in America now, right? Sherroyd remained in hospital fighting for his life for around 4 days, until February the 20th, when he was unfortunately pronounced dead at Stroger Hospital. No one was ever caught for this crime. However, K.I. has suggested pretty heavily on Twitter that Bostrel from Tookaville was the one responsible, with some of the internet detectives over on Chiraq psychology, digging deeper into these tweets and suggesting that when this shooting went down, Boss Trell had actually shot Sherroyd from all the way across the street. Impeccable aim, apparently the result of his use of a gun with a red laser beam sight on it to improve his accuracy. That gun itself apparently even featured in the Lil J FBG Duck music video for the song Critical, a Chief Keef diss that actually dropped months after this happened. Combine this with the fact that Boss Trell himself seemed to be bragging about the incident on Twitter later in the year, with KI also tweeting references to that red beam. A frankly brazen attack, which naturally only beget more bloodshed between O-Block and Tookaville in the months that followed. On the 28th of April, 2012, around 9:30 p.m, Marlon Monroe, also known as Lil Doc from Tookaville, had left a painting job and was walking towards a convenience store of the 6300 block of St. Lawrence Avenue, at which point a gunman passed by and sprayed the scene with bullets. Marlon apparently stumbled away from the scenes injured and collapsed into a tall patch of weeds in an empty lot next to the store. Even more shocking than that is the fact that when the police later came to the scene, they didn't even find Marlon's body, collecting up the shells and evidence and then leaving, with a 16-year-old boy actually discovering Marlon hours later in the weeds with a gunshot wound to his chest. Marlon had apparently been left there for over an hour after being shot, and within an hour of being discovered, he was pronounced dead at Stroger Hospital. Once again, it's unclear exactly who was responsible for this crime, but the next high-profile shooting between O-Block and Tookaville features a very familiar face indeed. On October the 13th, 2012, a 17-year-old boy named Modell McCambry was walking along the street with his cousin on the way to meet a girl. This went down on the 6300 block of South Rhodes Avenue. At around 9:30 p.m, somebody walked up and opened fire, hitting Modell in the chest. He too later died in Stroger Hospital. And what makes this story and the previous one so much more tragic is apparently Modell and Doc were actually related with a shared grandmother, who had apparently received the news of both of their deaths within months. But who was responsible, you ask? Well, many have suggested that it was actually O-Block future rap superstar King Von, mainly due to the fact that he himself had made numerous tweets to Tookaville Op Wooski, where Von seems to hint at him or at least his crew being responsible for Modell's death. In fact, Von was actually rumoured to have been present for numerous shootings carried out by the O-Block during this period of time, which naturally built him up a feared reputation as a member who was always down to do some dirt. He himself even famously bragged in his songs to have a total of 7 bodies under his belt. But regardless of how true that is, from here the O-Block shooters continued getting busy, attempting time and time again to claim bodies from Tookaville. On October the 30th, 2012, a man named Derek Johnson, also known on the streets as P5 or Crack, was gunned down. Now, he wasn't actually Tookaville, but a member of Jarrow City, a Chicago gang set north of Tookaville with a long history dating to back before this feud even began. But apparently, P5 was out walking on Tookaville turf, specifically the 6200 block of South Eberhart Avenue, where apparently J Money, King Von, and Big A of O-Block were lurking in the area looking for Tookaville ops to attack. In fact, only a day before this incident went down, King Von himself had tweeted that he was out trying to catch more bodies so that he could catch up with fellow O-Block shooter T-Roy. So story goes that when these O-Block shooters were out lurking, they spotted P5 around 9:13 in the morning, opening fire and hitting him multiple times. Some have even gone as far as to suggest that he was actually hit 6 times in the head and 9 times in the body. P5 was taken to Stroger Hospital, but once again pronounced dead within the hour. And from here, the wanton violence between O-Block and Tookaville was far from over, as the O-Block side would continue to seek retribution for the attacks that had been done on them, and so soon after the P5 incident, O-Block would appear to claim a high-profile member of Tookaville. 17-year-old Rodney Stewart, aka Boss Trell, aka the red beam slinging marksman who'd allegedly killed Sherroyd from way across the street for Tookaville, was apparently planning to flee town, tweeting about being excited for a fresh start on the 6th of November, even purchasing a bus ticket with the intention of leaving town on the 10th. But unfortunately, only 2 days before his scheduled departure, on the 8th of November, Boss Trell was found face down in an alley in the 2600 block of West 83rd Street. He'd been shot in the back of the head. Now, in case you couldn't tell, the location of this shooting is a long way from O-Block and Tookaville, and it's actually been suggested by some that J Money and T-Roy were actually responsible for coordinating a setup of Boss Trell via an allegedly disloyal ex-girlfriend, apparently luring him well away from Tookaville with the promise of meeting a girl, but when he arrived, BT was shot in the head and left for dead. His grandmother said the identity of the shooter is not a secret, but no witnesses were willing to step up. He didn't actually pass away immediately and apparently was left fighting for his life brain dead in the hospital for several days. This was followed by T-Roy of O-Block, who is widely believed to have been responsible for this incident, mockingly tweeting on the 8th of November, "No, Trell, stay alive." Meanwhile, Tookaville affiliates like FBG Cash were paying their respects to Boss Boss Trail. But ultimately, he passed away later that day. The death of Boss Trail is said to have had a huge effect on remaining Tookaville members, especially KI. After his death, Cash Out made a song in tribute called Dear Boss Trail, which seemed to hint that his past as a red beam slinging shooter was legit, even going as far as to dub him the real-life Max Payne. Meanwhile, of course, over on O Block, they were celebrating for having gotten retribution for their fallen brother Chiraq, but Boss Trail was of course a devastating loss for Tookaville, and he would soon be avenged in spectacular fashion. As on September 2nd, 2013, Jerome Wood, also known as J Money, from O Block was allegedly set up. Ironically, in a way not dissimilar to how Boss Trail had been set up, with J Money apparently visiting a location on the 6600 block of South Rhodes Avenue around 2 p.m. Allegedly set up by a girl on the ops turf, legend has it that J Money was expecting to see a woman he knew, but arrived to the location to be greeted by Lil B and KI from Tookaville. He apparently attempted to flee down a gangway into an adjacent property, but he was unfortunately shot in the head, collapsing outdoors and not making it. Tweets from other gang members have suggested that this incident was direct retaliation for P5, as well as Boss Trail, and KI actually tweeted after this incident about shooting people in the back of the head, tweets which many people thought suggested direct involvement by KI, referring to this exact incident. Funnily enough, within only a year, the other Tookaville member Lil B, who had supposedly been there that day for the J Money hit, was killed by the Chicago PD on March the 28th, 2014. With this going down after apparently being chased by cops who had seen a suspected drug deal, with the cops claiming that he hopped over a fence and then pointed a pistol at them, leading them to tase Lil B and shoot him multiple times, leaving him dead. After Lil B's passing, Patoon's cousin actually came out